And so the knife changed hands in their mind from the white aggressor to the innocent black man. Here's another way we go wrong. Which is farther north, Seattle or Montreal? And which is farther west, the entrance to the Panama Canal on the Pacific Ocean side or the entrance on the Atlantic side? In fact, Seattle is further north, but we usually think it's Montreal because we picture Canada as always being north of the U.S. And it's the Atlantic entrance of the canal that's further west, despite our assumption that the Pacific is always west of the Atlantic. What's happened is that we've been led astray by the mental maps we have in our minds. These maps can enlarge nearby familiar places and foreshorten faraway places, like this satirical picture of the world from a Bostonian's perspective. We also store mental pictures of objects like this one and scan them in our minds in much the same way we scan actual objects with our eyes. Now think back to the picture of the motorboat. Did it have a windshield? Did it have an anchor? When researcher Steve Koslin asked subjects each of these questions, they tried to answer as fast as they could by pressing a button. The results indicated that it took them longer to remember that there was an anchor than a windshield. This longer reaction time was taken to mean that the subjects were scanning a visual image of the motorboat in their minds. And because the anchor was farther away than the windshield, when they scanned the image starting from the back of the boat, it took longer to see the anchor with the mind's eye. A similar result occurred when subjects were asked whether each of these letters was a normal R or a mirror image. The further the R had been rotated, the longer it took subjects to answer, because in their minds they had to rotate the R's back into an upright position. Unlike computers, we humans often process information inefficiently. When subjects are asked to plan a shopping trip, for instance, they do so by skipping back and forth. That's because instead of reasoning out the problem in a direct, linear way, we tend to process information according to the meaning it has for us. If you like going to a bookstore better than going to a drugstore, that's going to affect how you solve the problem of planning a shopping trip. In fact, the content of a problem often determines if and how well we can solve it. If the elements aren't familiar enough, we're apt to have trouble. Although if we were truly logical, the form of the problem, not the content, would be the crucial factor. So even though the human problem solver can be rational, can reason, we aren't designed to be particularly logical. And that's where we part company with computers.
I think that the very fact that we have used the computer as a model of thinking has showed us many ways in which human beings are not terribly rational, ways in which we do stereotypical kinds of thinking, prejudicial kind of thinking, thinking which proceeds from an image rather than from a set of reasoned propositions. And the paradox is it was only by using the computer as a model of thinking that we saw the various ways in which human beings actually deviate from that kind of systematic, logical, step-by-step rationality.
While researchers have been trying to understand the functioning of the mind, both rational and irrational, most have tended to overlook the machine that actually runs us. But now, some cognitive scientists are starting to ask how the physiology of the brain enables us to reason, learn, and remember. Michael Posner of the University of Oregon uses brain imaging techniques to explore what parts of the brain are used in specific cognitive tasks, such as reading.
Recently, it's become possible to study problems like reading in normal people by using a method called positron emission tomography, which allows one to look at the blood flow in different localized areas of the brain in normal people as they perform cognitive tasks like reading. In our studies, we had people read single visual words which were presented directly in front of them, and we tried to study the component operations that are involved in that very simple task. In one condition, we had the people simply look at the visual words without doing anything with them. In another condition, we had them read the words aloud. In yet a third condition, we asked them to classify the words, that is, to give us the use of each word. For example, if they got the word hammer, they were to say pound. In each of these tasks, we were able to look at the areas of the brain which were active, that is, in which we saw different levels of cerebral blood flow. In general, we plot these areas in different colors. So when an area is very active, it's in a bright color, white or bright red, whereas when it is quite inactive, that is, when it differs only in a very small degree between its control condition and the experimental condition, it's in a dark color, purple or blue. And we found that very localized, very specific areas of the brain were active during different aspects of word reading. For example, when we asked people to give the use of a noun, say pound, a hammer, we found two areas of the brain active for that specific task. And really only two areas in the whole cortex seemed to be specially active for that task. By other experiments, we were able to show one of those areas, which is on the left, in the left frontal lobe, was it related to the association between hammer and pound. And another area, located on the midline, seemed to be more related to our attention, that is, to the attention necessary to generate that association and to be aware of the association so that one could store it or tell someone else about it. It was surprising to us that these higher level mental processes were this well localized, and in particular that they were so common among the various subjects that we ran. That is, that it was not the case that each person showed different types of activation, but rather all the people that we ran showed the same type of activation, suggesting that these operations are done in common ways among different people.
While some scientists seek to discover how our mind works, others are trying to apply that knowledge to everyday life, especially in education. Robert Glazer is the director of the University of Pittsburgh's Learning and Research Development Center, or LRDC.
The main mission of LRDC is really the study of learning. The study of learning in all its forms, as it occurs in schools, as it occurs with people who learn in the street, people who learn in villages, people who learn in cultures without school. The nature of learning in all its forms. Some people work on reading and comprehension. They examine the relationship between basic skills in reading and higher levels of comprehension. They examine the relationship between attaining automaticity, that is, unconscious processing of words, that is needed in order to be able to understand the content and the semantics of the whole paragraph. They're very interested in the relationship between individuals who haven't developed basic skills and individuals who have developed high levels of comprehension. For example, in playing tennis, one has to spend a lot of time on their basic strokes. But once these basic strokes are mastered, then these now don't require any conscious attention anymore. It all becomes relatively unconscious or automated performance. But what that does is free memory to be able to pay attention to sense and meaning and structure of what people are listening to and what they're reading. So this relationship between the conscious aspects of higher level processes and the unconscious aspects of higher level processes is one kind of study that goes on here. Some of the people at LRDC spend hours and hours and hours televising expert teachers in the elementary schools that teach arithmetic to young children. And they're trying to examine what is the experienced teacher, what is it that experienced teachers develop? What forms of explanation do they give to students? How do they manage their answers to students? How do they motivate the students? So we spend a lot of time understanding what is the nature of explanation, how they stimulate the students, and how they get the students to think.
3048.
I think that as we understand more and more about the human mind, there is no doubt that we increase the level of human intelligence. Now, we've always considered intelligence as somewhat native, endowment of the individual. But I tend to think of intelligence as a cognitive skill and ability to problem solve and the ability to learn. And it seems to me that the more we learn about human memory, the more we learn about human problem solving, we will be able to increase individuals' proficiency in learning to learn, in learning to teach themselves, and in learning higher levels of performance in the rather subject matters and the kind of technical knowledge that people have to acquire in doing their everyday life.
The revolution in cognitive psychology is really just beginning, and yet it's already made public the most private aspect of human nature, the working of the mind, with its enormous capacity for invention, creativity, and wisdom. In our next program, however, we'll chronicle some of the fallacies of human intuition as we look at the process of making judgments and decisions. And that includes your judgments and your decisions. So be prepared to put your mind on the spot and take some risks. Until next time, I'm Philip Zimbardo.
Funding for this program is provided by Annenberg CPB to advance excellent teaching. For information about this and other Annenberg CPB programs, call 1-800-LEARNER and visit us at www.learner.org. To learn more about the Annenberg CPB Channel series and workshops for teachers, how to take them for credit, how to buy them on video cassette, call 1-800-LEARNER and visit us at www.learner.org/channel. The Annenberg CPB Channel.